mass civil disobedience, non-payment of the poll tax. And let's be clear about it, it wasn't Tommy Sheridan or any other campaigner that recruited people to non-payment. The biggest recruiting sergeant was poverty itself. People couldn't afford to pay it. However, people were frightened. People were very frightened because people thought you could be jailed for not paying it. We tried to explain, no, you can't be jailed, but they can take the stuff out your house, they can take your furniture, they can conduct warrant sales for non-payment. So we started advocating non-payment. We had meetings up and down the country, very, very similar to the independence referendum. Hundreds and then thousands were turning out at meetings, turning out at rallies, and slowly but surely every village, every town, every city had an anti-poll tax union getting organised. And by the time it was introduced on the 1st of April, we had anti-poll tax unions in just about every working class area, in particular across Scotland. 6 months into the poll tax, there was over 500,000 people refusing to pay. 1 year into the poll tax, and there was over 1 million people not paying the poll tax. By that time, we were asked to transport the campaign, to export the campaign to England and Wales, and I was elected. By this time I was the Scottish chair of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation. I was then elected the All Britain chair of the Anti-Poll Tax Federation, and it became like a revolution of sorts.
How did it feel to be involved in something like that while it was happening?
Ian, you know, I suppose you look back in those occasions and it was just pure adrenaline. You know, it was one meeting after another, after another, after another, and because I was saying the same thing, when you say the same thing, you become adept at it. The beauty of fighting a campaign on a similar issue is it didn't matter what meeting you were going to, the message was the same. Right. So the more you were conveying the message, the better you were getting at conveying the message, and I found myself being able to communicate well with people. It became clear I had a talent for communication. I wasn't frightened. I was nervous, but I wasn't frightened of standing up in front of 20 people or 20,000 people. It was in my heart, and as long as I could unite what was in my heart with what was in my head, then I could speak honestly, and I could try and recruit people to what was a right and a just campaign. You've got to remember, the poll tax was described by the Labour Party as unfair, immoral, and I'm saying to myself, well, see, if it's unfair and immoral, why are you asking people to pay it? Why are you sending out sheriff officers to collect it? The Labour Party for me showed itself as a derelict organisation by this time. It was getting populated by the Kinnocks of the world, and then obviously in the early 90s by Blair as well. And I just found it to be a spineless organisation that wasn't prepared to fight a civil disobedience campaign. We drew a lot of inspiration around this period, Ian. A lot of our inspiration was drawn from the struggle in South Africa at the time. I remember speaking to people who were in South Africa and who were involved in the anti-apartheid movement, a lot of them underground with the ANC, and they had a big campaign against the pass laws. They used to burn the pass books, and they had a civil disobedience campaign against the pass laws, and we drew inspiration for that. Now obviously we weren't getting faced with the South African Defence Force shooting you as they were in Soweto and other townships, but we drew inspiration from their courage to stand up against bad laws. We drew inspiration from the Rosa Parks of the world, whose determination not to get up off her seat in Montgomery just because she was black and that she was apparently sitting in a seat reserved for whites. That civil disobedience led to changes in the law. Our inspiration was, if we civilly disobeyed the poll tax, we could change the law, and that's what inspired us. And by 1990, the big demonstrations, 31st March 1990, we were having a simultaneous one in Glasgow in the morning, and one in Trafalgar Square in the afternoon. And because I was the chair of the All Britain Federation, I was to speak in the morning in Glasgow. We marched from George Square to Queen's Park I remember it was fantastic. It was about 40,000 people, absolutely fantastic, brilliant. I remember one of the things about arriving in Queen's Park, we had all the stewards all set up, and my big mucker, the chief steward of the day, was a guy called Jack Harvey. He was a builder, Big Jack. He stays down in London now and still in touch with Big Jack. And Jack was the chief steward, and he came up to me on the stage and says, Tommy, there's a guy wants to sing. And we already had Hugh and Cry singing, and Elaine C. Smith and Davy Anderson. We already had Love and Money, who'd played concerts for us. It's a bit like today, the cultural support for Yes was similar to the cultural opposition to the poll tax. And Jack says, this guy wants to sing. I said, what's his name? Ricky Ross. He wants to sing. Him and his partner Lorraine, and of course it was Lorraine McIntosh, Ricky Ross, Deacon Blue, turned up at the demo, wanted to sing, and I'm like, let him up, of course, absolutely brilliant. That was the nature of the anti-poll tax campaign. People wanted to be part of it because it was right and it was just to fight against it. I get whipped away, spoke, and then get whipped away to the airport, and there's a wee funny story, and I hope this doesn't take too long, but a wee funny story, because I was late for the airport, and I thought I was going to miss the plane. The plane tickets had been booked for us and all the rest of it, and I thought I was going to miss the plane. Got into the airport, and lo and behold, it was still there. The flight was still there, and when I went up to the door opened, and here's this friendly face, Gail Healy, opened the door. It turned out that Gail was in charge of the plane that day. She was an air hostess, so she was what's known as the purser. So she's in charge of the plane, and she checked what was known as the ship's papers. That's what the passengers list is called, and she'd saw my name on the ship's papers, and she'd asked the captain to delay for 5 minutes to see if I was, because I hadn't turned up, because she knew me from school. Gail and I were in the same class at school, same modern studies class. Hadn't seen her for years, and Gail was always a darling. She's always dead good looking. Used to always fancy her. And here she opens the door, looking absolutely glamorous in her air hostess outfit and all the rest of it, absolutely beautiful. And she managed to hold back the plane for us, took me to my seat and all that. Great, absolutely brilliant. Did the demo, sat with us, and we chatted, and we arranged, because my flight was to fly down to London, do the demo, and come back up that night. It was the 9 o'clock I was to come back up, and so it says to Gail, chance my arm, and I said, what about meeting up later, maybe go for a wee drink or something, I didn't even drink, but just say that type of thing. And she says, oh okay, I finish at 10 anyway, and okay, we'll meet. And I said, oh brilliant, that's great. So that was the arrangement. So I was in a high, going down to London, met Gail, massive big demo, absolutely brilliant. I was met at the airport by a big mucker, John Ellen. I always remember Big John from Brighton, and John had said, it's massive, Tommy, it's massive, it's absolutely massive. And we got in the subway, got to the Trafalgar Square, and when we got out there, it was just incredible, and all the reports were coming, various snippets in the news and all the rest of it, and they were estimating anything for 100,000 upwards had turned out at this big demo. So I got to the Trafalgar Square, got up onto the plinth, and Tony Benn was next up to speak, and I was standing next to George Galloway, who was in Labour MP at the time, who had his wee daughter with him. And it was a massive, beautiful sunny day, and the crowds, they'd had to start, the crowd was still coming into the square, and the speakers were saying, look, we're having to start here, we can't hold back any longer, the crowds are so large, they're still leaving the park. I think it was Hyde Park they'd started it to mark something, they're still leaving the park, and the square was full. It was just absolutely massive. And I was next up after Tony Benn, and Tony Benn, brilliant speech as always, supporting mass non-payment, and the thing that was inspiring, the reason everybody wanted me to be there, was because unlike ourselves, we had nobody to show an example. We had to build it from scratch. By the time I was going down to speak to London, there's already 1 million non-payers. So the working class of England and Wales already have got an example. The jocks had already showed the way, so to speak. So I was next up after Tony. Tony Benn finishes. I'm about to get introduced, and then all hell broke loose. South African embassy, doors opened, and then from everywhere there was these galloping horses with the big truncheons, and there was just a mass melee, a riot ensued. And it became pretty scary, I've got to say, because there was a lot of, I remember there was a lot of building work going on round about the square, and some protesters had climbed up the scaffolding, and then there was objects getting thrown down, and there was fires getting started, the fire brigade was called, there was running battles in the street with the police and the police horses. It was absolute melee and frightening. I remember George being dead frightened for his daughter to get her away from the square because of what was going on. And I remember standing there, and I remember seeing, as if it was yesterday, somebody throwing a fire extinguisher down, and I think it was at a police car, but it hit a fire engine. And I always remember being dead angry about this, because one of the quirks of fate was, out of all of the trade unions in Britain in those days, the one trade union that backed the anti-poll tax campaign was the Fire Brigade Union, and here was firefighters getting called in because there was fires, and effectively getting hit with debris and all that. So I was dead angry at some of the protesters. In those days there was anarchists that were involved in a lot of stuff that was going on, and some of them were using the fact of the conflict for the poll tax. Some of them were using it for their own ends, and anarchy and anarchists have got their own ideas, and fair play to them. I don't agree with them, but when working class people are becoming the victims of these battles, you've got to be wary about it. And I thought it was wrong. If they want to fight the police, that's up to them, but leave the firefighters out of it, as far as I was concerned. Anyway, the story developed. Hundreds and hundreds of people were injured. Hundreds of people were arrested. I was the chair of the All Britain Anti-Poll Tax Federation. We had organised this march. I had to go on all the news bulletins that night because obviously we were getting attacked. This is a disgrace. You're organising riots in the middle of Trafalgar Square, and I was going on to say, look, we're not here to riot. We're here to build mass non-payment. The cause of this is the unfair poll tax. The poll tax has to go. And I was trying to argue against all the mainstream media, which obviously was saying you need to condemn this. This is a disgrace. Blah 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 blah. I had to stay in London for about 3 or 4 days to deal with the aftermath. Of course, that meant I couldn't be home for Gail. So I missed my date with Gail, and that was 1990. And funny enough, I never managed to reunite with Gail until 2 years later, in 1992. I'll fast forward quickly there because I was in jail for helping prevent Scotland's first warrant sale for non-payment of poll tax. I'd been sent to jail in March of 1992, and when I was in jail, I stood for election for the council, for Glasgow City Council. I stood as a Scottish militant Labour candidate, and lo and behold, I won election. I think I know it's the first time it ever happened, and it's never happened since, that somebody's been elected from a jail cell to Parliament, to the council. But when I got elected, I got a congratulatory postcard from Paris, from Gail, and then I got another one from Barbados, and then I got another one from Bulgaria, and then I got another one from Italy, and of course Gail was playfully teasing me with the fact that I was in jail while she was swanning the world as part of her job, and we started writing to each other, and I got released in July of 1992, and we agreed to meet up, and this time we did meet up, and
no anarchists
this time, and by the end of the year we became an item, so that by the beginning of 93 we'd started seeing each other. So that was the real love story that weaves in and out the political story, so to speak. So the thing about the riots in Trafalgar Square was, it was the beginning of the end for Thatcher and the poll tax, because they couldn't collect it. They couldn't even control their own capital city. And here was Thatcher, who used to stride across the world, go to Poland and go to every other part of the world as this Iron Lady, and yet she couldn't even control her own country, and she couldn't control her own capital city. And we used to always say at all the meetings, that when people said, "Oh, you can't win, Tommy. Mrs Thatcher's the Iron Lady. She's taken on Galtieri, she's taken on the miners, she's taken on the nurses, she's taken on the steelworkers. You can't beat her." And we used to always say, "Yes, you can. We can melt down the Iron Lady." And that's exactly what we did. We melted her down and we sent her to the political knackers yard where she belonged, and we beat the poll tax. Mr Major had to stand up in Parliament in 1991 when he won the leadership election, when Thatcher was knifed and got rid of, and he had to stand up and say that the community charge was being repealed because, and I'll quote him, he said, "it has become uncollectible." And of course, who made it uncollectible? The anti-poll tax campaign made it uncollectible. So that was a massive victory for ordinary folk, for civil disobedience. And my teeth was cut in that campaigning. That's, I was jailed in the course of that campaign. I was elected to the council in the course of that campaign. I held press conferences in the jail, which was a first. I got elected for the jail, which was a first. And we started to bring radical politics to the fore again. We tried to walk in the shadow of the giants that I mentioned earlier, the Macleans, the Gallaghers, the Davy Kirkwoods of the world, and obviously we'll never ever fill their shoes, but we were inspired by what they'd done, the Nan Barbers of the world. We were inspired by what they'd done, and we tried to walk in their shadow. And interestingly enough, I was jailed in 1992. I was given a 6-month jail sentence for my part in preventing the warrant sale at Turnbull Street on October the 1st, 1991. A lone parent for Greenock who had her coffee table, display cabinet and telly taken out of her house while she was out. Sheriff officers come up, broke down her door, took her coffee table, display cabinet and telly because she couldn't afford to pay the poll tax. Single parent, she returned to her house with a note on the door telling her to go to Abernethy McIntyre, the local sheriff officers in Greenock, and she had to pay for the locksmith for the new lock. She had to pay for the warrant sale in Pindon, and they were going to sell her furniture on the 1st of October at Turnbull Street at this warrant sale. And people like me said, "No, we're not going to do it. We can't allow that to happen." The day before it, I remember as if it was yesterday, I lived in the top flat, 265 Linthall Road, and I was in the house that day, and I remember hearing something go through the letterbox, and I went out to the hall and I saw this big brown envelope and I picked it up, and then I heard a car door slamming downstairs. I was 4 up. I looked out the veranda and I saw a big red 409 Peugeot pull away with 2 people in it with suits, and it was sheriff officers, and they just delivered an interim interdict to my house. Now I've got to say to you, when you deliver an interim interdict, you're supposed to hand it to somebody, but they never handed it to me. They put it through the letterbox. That was how cowardly they were. And this interdict was banning me and anybody else acting under my instruction from being at this warrant sale. So this was us getting it the day before it, right? So that was a big decision for me to take here. Would I no go to it, or do I go to it? We went to it, and hundreds of us there. There was 400 or 500 there. There was a bit of argy-bargy with the police. There was a bit of fisticuffs with the police as well. There's a story attached to that because it turns out that there was Asian provocateurs in the crowd. Police that started the argy-bargy, that was brought out in the court case because I was originally facing charges of incitement to riot, and the Crown had to drop the charges to incitement to riot because my lawyer was able to point out that the two people in plain clothes who threw the first punch were actually serving police officers. That's the type of thing that happens. So what happens then was they reduced the charge from incitement to riot and contempt of court to just contempt of court, because during the protest at Turnbull Street I had the interdict in my hand and I told everybody what it was all about. We were all supposed to be banned from being here, and I ripped it up and I threw it in the air. Quite an expensive wee bit of paper that actually cost me 6 months in jail. So I was sent down in March of 92 to Saughton Prison, served 4 months in jail for that, and that was released in July 92, and I walked into the City Chambers in Glasgow. Roll forward 7 years, I was elected to the Scottish Parliament 1999. and I introduced the first private members bill
I was about to ask this.
to abolish warrant sales. And the reason it's quite connected, and I think it's got a bit of consistency to it, is here was the wee guy from Pollock who got jailed for physically preventing a warrant sale. 1990 was actually 2000 by the time we had the bill presented, standing up with a nice suit on in Parliament, getting warrant sales abolished. So from the civil disobedience campaign of the streets to the political campaign of changing the law, that victory, that warrant sales bill, was a victory for all of the anti-poll tax campaign and everybody that had been involved in it over those years. And fortunately, we stopped anybody else being humiliated, because that's what warrant sales are about. They weren't about raising debt, they were about humiliating the working class who couldn't afford to pay their bills.
And did it feel connected the day that you were in the Parliament and the Act was passed? Did it feel like this was the culmination of what had gone before?
Ian, obviously, I would say this because I was right at the middle of it. It was co-sponsored by Alec Neil, who's now an SNP minister, and John McCallion, who at the time was a Labour member of Parliament. They were my two co-sponsors. It was written by a guy called Mike Daly of the Govan Law Centre, who is a fantastic campaigner. Member of the Labour Party, Mike and I disagree with that, but a fantastic campaigner. He wrote the warrant sales bill. He'd never written a bill before, but he wrote the warrant sales bill and it was passed. He now writes bills for all sorts of things, including the free school meals bill and lots of other ones. But that day in Parliament, wee story attached to this. I'm not sure that the story's ever been told, but Donald Dewar, who we've got a statue to in Glasgow. Donald Dewar is somebody who I've not got much time for. I always ask people what it is Donald Dewar did to deserve the plaudits he gets. He's supposed to be the father of Scottish politics, so I wonder what is it he did to become this father of Scottish politics, because I don't see anything that Donald Dewar achieved in terms of tackling poverty and inequality and low wages. Donald Dewar presided in Scotland over more and more poverty, the more and more Labour were elected. So, but Donald Dewar had his heart attack, his serious heart attack in the run up to the warrant sales bill being debated in Parliament. So he was off. The day that the warrant sales bill was to be debated, first stage debate in Parliament, Donald Dewar got out of his sick bed and they called a Labour group meeting of all the Labour MSPs at lunchtime in the Friends Meeting House, which was near to the Church of Scotland building where we were meeting temporarily because we didn't have a Parliament. And they were pulled down to this meeting, and Donald Dewar came out of his sick bed to address the Labour MSPs to tell them that they had to vote down this bill, vote against the abolition of warrant sales. Now I've got to say to you, Keir Hardie supported the abolition of warrant sales in the first independent Labour Party way back in 1888. People like Dennis Canavan in the Labour Party in Parliament had tried to introduce a bill to get rid of warrant sales in Westminster, but there had never been any time for it. Here was the Labour Party in 2000, Donald Dewar calling on the Labour Party members to vote against the abolition of warrant sales. Now this obviously came from John McCallion, who was in the meeting and was able to tell us exactly what Donald Dewar was doing. Now fortunately, a number of the Labour MSPs were saying, come on, you can't do this. You can't do this. We can't go back to our constituents and say we voted to keep warrant sales. We voted to keep humiliating the poor. We can't do this. We can't do this. And apparently Dewar was saying, no, you must do it. You must do it. We'll make changes. We'll introduce reforms and all the rest of it. So they were supposed to be whipped into line. The Liberal Democrats had already voted that they were going to vote against it. Jim Wallace was the replying minister, who was to reply to me as I moved the warrant sales bill. And the reason I'd spend a wee bit of time on this is it's the first time in Parliament, and speak to all the journalists who cover the Parliament, it's the first time in Parliament that they didn't know the outcome. Because usually every vote in Parliament, you know the vote's going to be because they're all whipped into line. What happened after I moved my position, support the warrant sales bill, and by the way, you've got to remember, the Scottish Trade Union Congress, the Poverty Action, Govan Law Centre, all of the poverty groups, they were all backing the abolition of warrant sales bill. And here we have the Liberal Party and the Labour Party joining with the Tory Party to say, no, we need to keep warrant sales, we need to keep humiliation of the poor. Jim Wallace gets up and replies and says, oh, we're going to introduce reforms, we're going to change the amount of things that can be taken and all that stuff. Then Alec Neil spoke, John McCall spoke, the gallery was packed with anti-poverty campaigners, and you're not supposed to applaud during parliamentary debates. They were all applauding, they were all getting told off by the presiding officer. And it was remarkable, because then what happened was all these wee notes were getting passed along the lines of all the MSPs, and all these wee discussions were taking place, and it became clear. I could see for Jim Wallace's face, it went white, because what became clear was they'd lost it. And what happened was their original opposition, none of the Labour MSPs could be relied on any longer. And what happened in the vote is most of them abstained. Now, by the way, bad enough that they never actually voted for it. John McCall voted for it, Elaine Smith voted for it, the rest of them abstained. The Tories voted against it, some of the Liberals voted against it, some of them abstained, but we had enough votes because the SNP backed it, and the independents, Margaret MacDonald, Dennis Canavan, Robin Harper, we all backed it. We won. We against all the odds, we actually passed a bill that was against the executive. The executive were against it, and we beat them. And by the way, it's the first time and it's the last time it's happened. There's never been another private member's bill that the executive hasn't backed. But we won, we abolished pindens and warrant sales, and fundamentally, very important, we managed to get millions of pounds poured into debt advice across Scotland. Because one of the things that became apparent in the course of that campaign was one of the reasons people were in debt is because there was so little advice about how to deal with debt, and that there was so little funding for debt advice agencies like the Govan Law Centre, like the Castlemoat Law Centre, like Money Advice Scotland. We managed to get millions of pounds committed to that. So not only did we change the law, but we actually changed the facilities for people in relation to debt advice as well. So I tell you that wee story just that anybody out there who's involved in things and they think, we'll never change things, right? We were campaigning with no arse in our trousers, campaigning against the poll tax and campaigning against warrant sales, and some people might have thought we'd never win and we're against the Iron Lady. We beat the Iron Lady, but even better than that, we then went on to change the law as well. So please, if you're fighting for something that's right and just, never lose faith, keep the faith, you can always win.
We fast forward to the next Scottish Parliament elections, probably the high point